You know, people these days like to say quite often that we have a gun violence problem in this country. Well, we really don't have much of a violence problem at all. In fact, violent crime has been declining over the last 3 decades. And we definitely don't have a gun violence problem. What we have is a violent people problem. And you know, I was really surprised this weekend when I saw Chicago's top cop, Superintendent Eddie Johnson, or as I like to call him, Super Johnson, actually addressing that issue honestly. He was saying what we have is a small number of the population that have chosen a life of violence and crime. And these people are responsible for the crime rates that we see. And that if we wanted to deal with the actual crime rates, we would deal with these people. And what he's basically saying is we don't have a gun violence problem. We have a gang violence problem. We have these people in inner cities and other disenfranchised places that are joining gangs and choosing lives of violence and crime. And he went on to point out that no one really wants to solve this problem. Politicians want to exploit these crime numbers because they want to keep people afraid. Also, if you start holding these gang members responsible, politicians run the risk of alienating minorities because these gangs tend to be comprised mostly of minorities because of the circumstances of where they're located. And another reason is if you start holding people personally accountable for their actions, well, you're fostering a system of self-reliability and self-accountability, and politicians definitely don't want to do that. Now, he didn't say all of this, of course. I have expanded quite a bit on what he said. But what he did say actually took a pair. So I guess you could say that Super Johnson comes with big balls. Now, I know some people come from disadvantaged backgrounds. I come from a disadvantaged background. I was poor as dirt. No one ever has to tell me anything about being poor. I know what it's like to be poor. But I also know that when you're in that place in your life, you have two choices. You could overcome your circumstances, or you can use them as an excuse to be the worst person you can be. I mean, it is one thing to steal a loaf of bread to feed your starving children. It's another thing to sell drugs so that you can afford gold chains and a Bentley. Those two things aren't comparable. So I don't want to hear, oh, it's just children that are disadvantaged and they're trying to meet their base needs. No, these are gangsters that are trying to get rich being gangsters. So people need to really start addressing the actual problem, like Superintendent Johnson said, or Super Johnson said, and stop demonizing guns. We don't have a gun violence problem in this country. Inanimate objects don't enact violence. And plus, if you take suicides and gang violence out of our gun death rates, there's almost nothing left. Random acts of homicide with a handgun are very rare in this country. So if they really wanted to do something about death rates from guns, the first thing they could deal with is suicides, especially with our vets, people that need the help the most. We have vets committing suicide at a rate of dozens per day. That's not a good thing. That is a horrible thing. Why aren't they putting more energy towards that? And then start realizing that the people committing most of the crimes, they have a choice as to whether they commit those crimes or not. And when they commit them with a firearm, start locking them up and throw away the key. And if we just do these two things, if we start providing access to proper medical care for people that are depressed or mentally ill, especially our veterans, if we start allowing them that access without the risk of social stigma or losing their constitutional rights, I think a lot more people will get the treatment they need. And if we start holding these criminals, these gangbangers, accountable for their life decisions, for their decision to live a life of crime and violence, then I think we'll make some real progress to solving the real problems that this country faces.